President, I want to thank you
for this initiative.
Sur le sujet très important, c'est les violations des droits de l'homme en Iran et aussi l'ingérence du régime de Mullah.
Also, the involvement of the Iranian regime in Syria, and the result has been the creation of Daesh. C'est Bashar al-Assad who created Daesh, and also all these migrants, the Syrian migrants who have been coming to Europe. It's the result of Bashar al-Assad. Sadly, is Bashar al-Assad who has been in power thanks to the support of the Mullah regime. What we have today is a big problem, not only for Middle East, but also for Europe and the whole world.
Je veux parler sur le sujet de...
Also, I want to talk about the issue of the elections in Iran, about the illusion of moderation, in Iran. If you allow me, I will continue in Farsi.
I can't hear it. Mr. Gerard Depre, Chairman of the Friends of the Free Iran in the European Parliament, Honorable Representatives, dear friends, I'm very pleased to be here in Europe's House of Democracy, and I would like to thank you for your concern about the violation of human rights in Iran and the Iranian people's resistance. An election sham was held last week, and I reiterate, it was a sham election, an election without any opposition, which was in fact a race among present and former officials in charge of torture and executions. But even this show was important from several angles. Firstly, all the candidates had already proven their loyalty to the Mullah's supreme leader and his policy of domestic repression as well as terrorism and warmongers. In fact, all of them are cut from the same cloth. For example, in the list of candidates sponsored by the so-called moderate faction include the present Minister of Intelligence and 3 former Ministers of Intelligence, each of whom have long records in espionage and massacre of innocent people in their posts that they had. The list also includes a religious judge of the Mullah's regime who personally has issued a stoning decree and oversaw its implementation. The video clip of this dreadful crime was exposed by the Iranian resistance at the time. Therefore, the 2 rival factions have no difference over their visions. Their dispute is over gaining power, or better to say, to have a bigger share of power. And this is what the rivalry is all about. The other fact is that despite calls by all the ruling faction, the majority of the people of Iran refused to vote. Despite their earlier claims and flatteries, the mullahs were not able to cover up such extensive public apathy towards the sham election, especially the ignoring of the youth regarding this sham election. And it was very clear. They are so concerned, the regime officials, about public upheavals that, as the regime's interior minister admitted, they deployed some 1 million security forces to keep the situation under control during the election regime. They had already declared that the mullahs are engaged in a political crisis. The election sham revealed the fact that the regime's internal balance has become upset against Khamenei, against Khamenei personally. In other words, the elections, the sham elections, has exposed a deep rift at the top of the regime, which has further aggravated its fundamental instability. In the meantime, the regime has no way towards opening and moderation. All the regime's factions, including their faction led by Rafsanjanian factions and their allies who entered the mullah's parliament, share common viewpoints on domestic suppression, exploitation of terrorism, and plunder of the public health. We remember the 8 years of Rafsanjani as the regime's president, which were accompanied by atrocious suppression of popular uprising and assassination of opposition figure in foreign countries that we can all remember. He and his cabinet members are pursued by judiciary of Germany, Switzerland, and Argentina for their involvement in terrorist activities. Today, you can see firsthand that under Rouhani, 2,300 executions have taken place, and the massacre of the people of Syria has also been escalated. In addition, Khamenei will never abandon power as he relies on the Revolutionary Guard Code, and any form of change in the regime will lead to its overthrow. As a result of this election, the regime will become generally weaker and further paralyzed as a result of this power struggle. I must also point out that the election outcome has not and will not change anything in the Iranian people's political and economic life, and that there is no serious winner within this regime in this so-called election that was just held. And I must say that after the nuclear deal, the regime, contrary to what it was expected in the West, particularly among the officials and government officials, the regime has executed hundreds of people after the nuclear deal. Arrest of families of Camp Liberty residents, as well as harassment of journalists, lawyers, followers of other faith, and ethnic minority youth continue forcefully. On the other hand, ballistic missile tests and maneuvers continue without any pause, and the Iranian regime formally announced that we do not comply with the UN Security Council resolutions, including the resolution 2231 of the UN Security Council. On the regional level, unfortunately, the mullahs have escalated their aggressive interferences in Syria and participation in the genocide of the defenseless people of that country under the auspices of Western action. The mullahs have dispatched at least 60,000 revolutionary guards and other mercenaries to Syria when Russian airplanes bombing the Syrian. The IRGC is the main ground force at work in this dreadful and destructive war against the people of Syria. They brutally massacre civilians, not sparing even school children and the ill, and they encircle and destroy residential areas. They have left, as a result, millions of people homeless, and have launched an extensive genocide. This is really the irony of history, the bitter irony of history, that the people of Iran, that the money that has been provided as a result of lifting the sanction, now the mullahs are buying advanced weapons for the Syrian dictator and using that to kill more Syrian people and resulting to the influx of more refugees into the Western countries. That's why the people of Iran strongly detest the IRGC bloodbath in Syria. This has nothing to do with the people of Iran. And at the same time, the Iranian regime has dropped a policy of double standards, despite being the main cause of instability in the region, but at the same time claims to be a proponent of diplomacy and talks to resolve the problems of the region. This is nothing but a great deception. Killings and genocide in Syria is part of the regime's strategy of survival, but at the same time it has turned into a quagmire for the religious fascism ruling Iran. And the European Union yet has adopted over the past 2.5 years a very passive policy to the violation of human rights in Iran and the regime's complicity in the massacre of the people of Syria. So on behalf of the Iranian people's resistance, here at the House of Democracy in the European Union and among the supporters of the human rights for all the people around the world, including about Iran, and to the rest of the region, I warn that a serious failure to adopt a decisive policy on human rights abuse in Iran will further embolden the mullahs to resume their bomb-making project and further engage in genocide, in warmongering outside Iran, in particular genocide of the Syrian people. Yes, and I repeat that the Iranian resistance warn that the failure of a decisive policy on human rights violations in Iran will embolden mullahs to resume once again and intensify their warmongering policies, and particularly killing of the Syrian people. A difference. I would like to conclude. Let me conclude by stressing on a few points, and I would like to seek the assistance of members of European Parliament who advocate peace, democracy and human rights for the realization of these objectives. A major part of the Iranian regime's murderous policy against the people of Iran is their attacks against members of the People's Mujahideen of Iran in Camp Liberty. The October 29th rocket attack on Camp Liberty, which was carried out by the Iranian regime agents in Iraq, left 24 dead. I urge the European Parliament to demand from EU and its member states to fulfill their pledges for the safety and protection of Camp Liberty residents. Western governments must condition their relations and trades with the Iranian regime on the end to executions in Iran and release of political prisoners. The solution to the tragedy in Syria, the crisis in Iraq, and instability in the Middle East will be found only after the IRGC is expelled from this and all of those countries. And the most dangerous thing is to engage and involve the Iranian regime in the case of Syria. Illusion of moderation by the mullahs must be set aside. We have always underlined that a viper never give birth to a dove, and there will never emerge a reformist from within the mullahs, as this has been the case, and the experience of the past 3 decades must have made it clear to the world and be a lesson. And finally, in the heart of the right policy on Iran undoubtedly lies respect for the Iranian people's desire and will to achieve freedom and democracy, which requires to overthrow the religious fascism in Iran. I thank you all very much.